Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Gordon. I'm very happy to be here with you. I wish I could be with you in person, but being with you virtually is next best. I want to thank the International Association of Psychologists for Grief and Bereavement for inviting me to participate. And it's been a good experience for me thinking about coming here and thinking about what I might have to contribute to a group that obviously is very steeped in an understanding of and treatment of grief and bereavement. One of the things that I did, and I'm basically an English speaker, I'm a US psychiatrist, is I looked up the word grief. And I discovered, and this was a bit of a surprise to me, that it comes from the Old French grieve, which means not only pain and loss, but also means burden. And I realized that's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the burden of grief. And when I think of burdens, I think of something heavy that we have to carry. And it is clear to me, it's been clear in my personal experience of carrying physical burdens, but also in my experience of going through grief, that the burden of grief is lighter when there are other people who can carry it with us. And so I want to focus in this talk on, I want to lead up to a kind of conclusion, which has to do with the importance of having groups available for people who are grieving. And not necessarily all focused on grief, but groups available where people can come and talk about grief and share their experience with other people. Now, in Ukraine, it is clear to me, I've been there 5 times since the Russian invasion of February 2022. And I've met with many, many hundreds of people, psychologists, physicians, teachers, veterans, active people who are engaged in active combat, family members of all of the above, and met with lots of little children too. It's clear to me that grief is shared by just about everybody I met. Everybody knows somebody who has suffered. They've experienced a sense of loss of so many people obviously have lost their homes. That creates grief. So many people, nobody knows exactly how many deaths and how many have been wounded in this war, but everyone I know knows somebody who has lost a home, somebody who's had to send their children out of the country, somebody who's lost a family member or a close friend. So the grief, as in my experience, is very, very widespread, if not universal in Ukraine. So learning to deal effectively as we can with grief, with the loss that causes the grief, and with the burden that loss, that grief causes, that's a challenge that is shared by or faced by everybody in Ukraine. So the first thing about grief is we need to recognize that we are grieving, especially when there's a war on, and especially for combatants, but also for so many people. They have to press ahead. They have to do what needs to be done to survive, to take care of life, to take care of all the practical things in life, so that the rituals of grieving that may be there in the society and the time for grieving that pretty much everybody needs may simply not be available. And therefore, we may not want to recognize our need for grieving. So the method that my colleagues and I at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, and I founded the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, which is based in the US, but has worked with people in war zones and after wars and climate-related disasters and mass shootings for the last I founded it 32 years ago, and we've been working in those situations of mass psychological trauma and loss for over 25 years. And what's become clear to me is that in order for people to be able to recognize and grieve appropriately, which means not only first understanding the burden that's there, and secondly, being able to let go of that burden, to not have it weigh so heavily. So the first thing that's necessary is to create a greater biological and physiological balance. That balance has been disrupted by war, by the loss, by the grief, by all the challenges of dealing with a wartime situation. So right at the very beginning, whether I'm working with individual children or adults, or we're training people, because that's what the Center for Mind-Body Medicine's job is to train health professionals, mental health professionals, educators, community leaders in our model of self-awareness, self-care, and group support so that they can deal with the trauma they've experienced, so they can deal with the grief that is burdening them. And the way we begin is by saying, first of all, it is possible. It is possible to understand what's going on. It is possible to lighten the burden. And that's something that I've seen personally in over 25 years of work in these situations of population-wide trauma. And that as a psychiatrist, I've seen over 50 years of work with human beings in all walks of life in the United States and many places around the planet. And so the way we do this is first of all by saying there is hope. It is possible to move through this process of loss, of grieving, to recover from the wound of trauma. And the meaning of the word trauma, it's a Greek word, is wound. To recover from the wound of trauma, which so often is so intimately associated with grief, is to come into physiological and psychological balance. So I'm going to take about 10 minutes now to teach you a technique that is fundamental for coming into balance, that is fundamental both for recognizing the grief that we have and for initiating or contributing significantly to us moving through this process of grieving, to learning what we have to learn from it, perhaps even to growing stronger through it, to experiencing through grief what has been called in modern society by modern psychology post-traumatic growth. And I would say that is post-grieving growth, or growth and development and wisdom that comes through the process of grieving. So one of the first steps is coming into balance. And I'm going to teach you this technique. And as I go through this slow, deep breathing technique, I'm going to review the physiology of what it's doing. Most of you will have learned this physiology some time ago, but it's important to review it, I think, as well. So I'm going to teach you this technique, which is technically a concentrative meditation. We're going to concentrate on the breath coming in through the nose and out through the mouth. We're going to concentrate on our bellies softening and relaxing as we breathe slowly and deeply. And also concentrate on the words soft as we breathe in and belly as we breathe out.